It is in writing. It has a definite also beginning and also expiration date, and it contains the mandatory negotiable commission split as well. It has really defined the position. In order for us to get a commission, right? In order for a commission to be earned, there's different elements that have to transpire, right? First, you have to have a listing agreement signed and executed by the seller. And then all the bullet points that are necessary, because if there's a gap or no language in here, it can define your position from ultimately getting compensating a commission earned, right? Now, in looking at the listing agreement, right, this is the exclusive right to sell, C.A.R form RLA, revised back in June of this year, 2022. It goes through the motions of the date preparation, exclusive right to sell, right? And then it goes into, the seller, the brokerage, and then the beginning date. Here's where we need to really define that position, because if anything happens that a seller decides to cancel, a seller decides to back out, doesn't want to sell the property, or the listing becomes an expired listing, then how do we get paid a commission, right? Well, there's a couple of elements that need to happen in order for you to ultimately earn a commission. So we're going to dive deep into this conversation to really give you some perspectives and avenues and how this can help you once you get a listing, seller agrees, and how you pay a commission, right? Well, one, you have to find a ready, willing, and able buyer, right? You get the listing, you get it executed. Congratulations, you have the listing. Now you're inputting the property into the MLS, right? You got a professional photographer going out there taking photographs of the home, and before you know it, wazoo, you have it on the multiple listing service, and now it's being promoted as an active listing, right? So now you're promoting a property that gave you the authorization from the seller to list their properties, promote the property, market the property, and more so find that ready, willing, and able buyer, right? And it can be two ways. It can be that you find and capture that buyer, or it can be that the agent who represents the buyer has the buyer in place and is submitting an offer on your listing. Okay. So when it comes to understanding your elements to your position and how you earn a commission, then you have to look at, the importance of why we have to document everything, why it's important to have all this in writing, right? Because we can go through the motions of saying, I've earned a commission, I'll do a commission, seller, you need to pay me, right? Well, it doesn't work that way. There's so many elements that have to happen in order for you to get a commission. When the commission is earned under the residential listing agreement, a commission is earned after a seller accepts an offer and the transaction closes. So one, the seller has to accept the offer, right? A ready, willing, and able buyer. You promote it, you market it, and now there's attraction to this listing. And now someone says, look, I looked at the property, I really want this property. Now that buyer is going to submit what's called a purchase agreement, right? That purchase agreement now gives you the negotiating tools to either accept, counter, or reject the offer, right? So again, just going through the trenches of what you need to do in order for you to satisfy and earn a commission. So in order for, in the misconception that many brokers believe that just the locating the buyer is ready, willing, and able to purchase the property on the terms of the listing is also a listing broker needs to do to earn a compensation, but more is required. So just because you find that buyer, just because that buyer submits an offer and goes through the motions of getting the loan approved and home inspections and all that, doesn't necessarily still mean that you're going to be paid a commission. Okay, because if that buyer decides to cancel, decides to back out, decides they don't want the property, or after doing their due diligence regarding the property, they find it's just too many issues with the home, I don't want to, buy this property after all, then within the buyer's contingency period, the buyer has the right to cancel. The buyer has the right to not move forward with the sale of the home. So you cannot argue and say, well, I'm still owe a commission, right? This is why you have what's called the beginning date and then an expiration date. And I want you to really understand that statement, because if you have a beginning date and an expiration date, that's when it starts for you. That's when the listing begins and when the listing expires. And after it expires, right, are you still entitled to a commission? Well, it really depends. It really depends on how you draft this agreement and what language, in addition to all this, you're including as part of the expiration or cancellation. Okay. A commission is earned if the seller withdraws the property from the market. So the listing broker also earns a commission if, without the broker's consent, the seller withdraws the property from the sale of or makes marketable during the listing period. If the seller deprives the broker of the rights to market the property, that is a breach triggering a commission obligation. Continuing refusal to accept a full price offer may be construed as an effective way of withdrawing of the property. So what that entails basically is, if you have a listing agreement signed by the seller, you have now what's called an exclusivity of this home. You have the ability to market the home. And as we dive into this agreement, right here it says beginning date, expiration date. Then it goes into the property. So all this needs to be added in there. You need to have the physical address. You also need to include the parcel number, right, which is better known as the APN number. You also have to distinguish what type of property is it? Is it a manufactured home? What type of agreement do you have in place? Is it a probate? Is it a manufactured home? Is it a condominium? All these are parameters that you need to understand when you're drafting these agreements. On top of all that, you also have the listing price, right? The listing price is what you're planning to list a home. Okay, and that needs to also be included as part of the agreement, because again, why would a seller sell property when you don't have that information in pen, right? So you need to have that price. This is why we do comparables, right? This is why we analyze, we look at the multiple listing service to determine an opinion of value, right? Section 2 talks about, Section 2B talks about, listing terms. What additional terms on top of what's already on the exclusive right to sell are you authorized to do so? Are you asking for the seller to pay for certain things on top of already the commission that they were going to pay you, right? So these are parameters that you need to look into and make sure that you, as a real estate professional, understand. Now, let's talk about the compensation. So Section 3 talks about the amount of rate. A real estate commission is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually and may be negotiable between the seller and the broker. Real estate commissions include all compensation and fees to the broker. So let's dive deep into this conversation and really just get a handle of what this compensation to the broker is. All right. And this section is where you're going to click here and you're going to put a percentage, right? A percentage of what you're charging the seller, the principal. Okay. There is the total commission that you are anticipating, right? That includes if there is a cooperating broker involved, a buyer with another agency or agent involved, then they get a split of that commission, right? Now, as you can see, the notice of the amount of rate of a real estate commission is not fixed by law, meaning that whatever commission you want to charge, right, it's your discretion. Okay, it's the seller's discretion too. They may say, look, Simon, I know that the standard is 6%, but I do not want to sell it for 6%, but I'm willing to give it to you for a lot less if you're willing to discount your commission, right? Now, there's many variables, many skill sets in order for you to know how to navigate and ultimately earn what you are entitled to, right? You know, because we preach and we lecture and we provide you with the necessary objections on how to handle these type of questions that are thrown, right? What is your value proposition? What are you going to do above and beyond that you're entitled to and earn a full commission, right? Now, for many of us who have been in this industry for a long time, you know, we look at all those aspects of it and say, you know, what's the standard? Well, the standard has been, in my opinion, 6%, 3% to the listing side, 3% to the buy side. Okay. Now, as the language on here says that real estate commissions are negotiable, can be negotiable, may be negotiable, meaning, you know, can they be banned? Can they be modified? The answer is yes, they can. Okay. Does that mean that 5 or 6% is set in stone? No. It can mean that if the seller is willing to pay you more commission for the property, and as long as they're okay with it, then by all means, that's fine. Okay. Now, most, if not a lot of real estate companies do have provisions in their policies, right? And these provisions, you know, protect not just the market center, but also, you know, the level of customer service that we are providing, right? Because most real estate companies are not considered discount brokerages, okay? And what I mean by that is we're not going to say no if you need to ask for an approval of getting a commission a lot less than, you know, your typical standard of 5 or 6%. What we're saying is, let us help you, let us coach you in how you can handle those objections, right? Because if you really play out the playbook on this, there's ways and avenues in how you can approach this to articulate your position and why you should be paid a full commission. That's all I'm saying. But do you sometimes have to bend a little bit? Yeah. That's the awesome part of real estate deals and real estate transactions. You know, you bend and you kind of go through the motions of what you need to do. Sometimes you have to extend escrow longer than what you originally put, right? Typically, we put 30 days. Sometimes we have to extend that to another 10 days, another 15 days. Or releasing of contingencies, right? Part of the process for buyers and sellers is that the buyer release certain contingencies, right? Well, you know, those can be also modified and adjusted. Nothing is really set in stone. And I want you to be very clear that, you know, in all agreements, just because it's in black and white doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go all black and white. There may be issues, there may be obstacles, there may be walls that you come across. You just got to know how to navigate, you know, your position. A commission is earned if the seller cancels the listing and is a breach. Well, you know, yes and no. Just because a seller, okay, just because a seller says, you know what, Simon, I changed my mind. I don't want to sell after all. You got to look at every case by case scenario, right? Because what if there's a death in the family? What if something transpire that trigger them that now, unfortunately, they cannot sell the property? For example, what if they're doing a job transfer, right? And the only reason they're selling their property is because they have a job transfer back east. They need to sell this property so that way they can be closer to their job, right? And then that stops. Something happens, something changes, you know, they don't ultimately get the position, or financial reasons, right? They go in a different direction, or maybe they find another position that pays more and it's local and they don't need to sell. Are you going to force a commission on someone that, you know, has a necessity of urgency that now they don't have to sell their home, right? Well, I would hope the answer is, you know, no, you know, you're gonna adapt to, and you're gonna be accommodating to the clients, because the way you have to look at it is really simple, is look at it from a perspective of future, right? The future business, because even though maybe you need to cancel in the future, they may come back and say, look, Simon, I'm really grateful. I really appreciate you, you know, canceling the agreement, you know, but now 2 years later, we are now in the position that we want to sell. You know, I gave my 2 years in this work environment, and now I'm ready to retire, and now I'm ready to move out of state, right? Well, there's the opportunity, okay? And you got to look at it from that parameter, okay? You know, just because the seller, again, wants to cancel, doesn't mean that you're entitled to a commission. Well, it really depends, right? If the seller is making it very challenging, is not making it showable, is giving you excuses, not allowing you to show the property, not navigating these offers, not wanting to talk, not willing to come to some type of terms, then yeah, we can position ourselves to say, well, look, okay, I understand. You don't want to sell. I can't force you to sell, but look at the time and effort that we put in as professionals. You know, I should be entitled to something, right? Now, also, I want to be very clear. If you don't put it in writing, it never exists. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to go above and beyond, meaning if you're going to, you know, do any type of additional expenses, right? Such as maybe you're doing staging, maybe you're doing professional photography where it involves aerial drone footage, right? Videos, right? And this can be in the thousands, right? No one wants to invest all this money without getting a return on their investment, right? Well, that's not fair for the agent that had put the time, effort, and energy into their position, right? And trying to earn a commission, because the way you get compensated is once the sale is recorded, closed, right? And obviously you have a written agreement from the seller allowing you to be paid a commission, okay? There's many levels of things that must happen: signatures, initials, dates of these agreements, buyer coming in, submitting an offer, buyer going through the motions and closing the deal, and then ultimately the property recording. We're one of the last ones that we get paid in a commission, right? We're not the first, right? It's not like Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know, I listed your property, I want to get paid first. No, we need to sell the property and be one of the last ones to get paid. Teresa, you have a question?
Yes, I thank you, Simon. I have a question is, when we do the listing and they picked us as a listing agent, there's section C, 3C, is there a part where if they rethink and they don't want to sell and you have already invested in this, is that part where there's a terminology to use correctly to say you will, is it a term that you write down on 3C? What is it that you write down there? If it, due to cancellation or withdrawal, is there what do you write there so that you can, like I said, on the contract is negotiable, but you know, if you already did the photographer, the drone, and the staging, and where do you get the compensation to write clearly in black and white that they understand? Is it right there? What is the terminology?
Are you referring to this section here?
Correct. Is that where we put it in, or is that? Yes.
I'm referring to here.
Oh, I apologize.
See, right here is where you're going to put, if you're asking for any additional compensation on top of the commission. So for example, you know, you are getting a professional photographer, or you're asking the seller to pay for your transaction coordinator, right? And let's say your TC is $300, $400, whatever that amount is, $500. Then and the purchase agreement entered into the purchase agreement, You have the percentage here, and then you have a flat fee here. And then any additional terms, then you would add it here. Now, the other section that I want you to also be mindful of is this section here, okay? This is what we call an exclusion after the cancellation or expiration of the listing. For example, within 121 calendar days after the end of the listing period or an extension, or after any cancellation of this agreement, unless otherwise agreed, seller enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to anyone, and then the prospective buyer or that person related entity, one who physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period, or an extension by the broker or a cooperating broker, or two, from whom broker or any cooperating broker submits to seller a signed written offer to acquire, lease, exchange, or obtain an option on the property. Seller, however, shall have no obligation to the broker under paragraph 3A2 unless later than the end of the listing period or any extension of cancellation, broker has given the seller a written notice of the names of such prospecting buyers. So meaning is, and this is how you're entitled to a commission if the seller does decide to cancel. You want to make sure that you are putting something in here, right? If leaving it blank, it's not going to do justice for you. You want to put a number. If it's 60 days, if it's 90 days, if it's 120 days, you want to put something. I've always been accustomed to put 120 days, 4 months after it expires or it cancels. The reason is 4 months is more than enough time that if anyone wants to buy this property, they're going to do it within that time frame, meaning that there's certain things that must happen in order for you to be and for you to earn a commission. The 120 calendar days, as an example, is just one pillar, right? That after the seller decides I want to cancel, or the property expires after 6 months because no buyers ended up buying the property, or you couldn't come to an agreement with a buyer, and now the listing expires, then it extends that time frame for an additional 4 months after it expires or cancels. That if you provide in any of these buyers who either submitted, physically seen the property, or inquired that you have a hold on, then you can come back to the seller and say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Smith ended up buying this property. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was someone that saw the property when I had the listing prior, and now I am entitled. But you have to also provide that list of all the names prior to this cancellation or expiration, right? You cannot do this 2-3 months later and realize, oh my gosh, the buyer ended up buying the property that I was either got an offer or represented the buyer on this. At the moment that you know that this is not going to go through with the listings, or they're not extending or canceling, or the listing expires, immediately you want to get the list of anyone that has submitted offers and present that to the seller. Send an email to the seller. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I am providing you with the exclusion list of all the people that have submitted offers through the period, right? And the reason you want to do that is because now you hold the seller accountable to a commission earned. If any of these buyers do end up buying, right, now you have proof. We gave a copy to the seller, and here's the name of the person. How do you verify that? Well, you can check title. Immediately, go on to the or you can call title and find out who are the new buyers, right? And if you can prove that these buyers are the ones that were originally someone that submitted an offer, or they physically saw the property, based on this statement, the seller would be entitled to pay you a commission. Okay, so I hope that kind of addresses that parameter. Now, if we go down where it says, because again, the whole purpose is how do you earn a commission, right? With the real estate listing agreement, right? We understand the buyer's position in submitting an offer. You know, we're in the mercy of the buyer buying, closing, and then we get paid a commission. But how do we, as listing agents, how do we recoup, you know, compensation when the listing agreement defines, you know, the opportunity for us to list the property, showcase the property, but ultimately it has to also sell the property in order for us to be paid a commission. So a commission may be earned after the listing period expires pursuant to what we call the safety clause. And this is what I'm talking about, is the safety clause, right? The seller may owe compensation to the broker if certain person purchased after the expiration of the list. The provision is often called that safety protection clause. However, before the listing broker can claim compensation in these circumstances, several criteria must be satisfied, right? One, provide that exclusion list, right? Here is all the people that have seen this property, right? That gives now the seller notice if any of these people buy. Now, what they need to do, okay, because you're thinking, if they're going to go with another listing brokerage, right, then technically speaking, they would be paying two commissions, right? The commission that you are entitled to and the commission that now their new brokerage, right, is entitled to. And who in the right mind would pay two commissions, right? Well, that would be foolish. That would not be something that any seller would want to pay, is two commissions, right? So in essence, what do we need to do here? Well, what they need to do is when they list the property with another brokerage on the listing agreement under section F2, right? F2, seller warrants that the seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities. So here is where you need to put that if your consumer, the seller, decides to go in a different direction and list the property with a different brokerage, right? You as a seller would have to tell and exclude these individuals. So let's say that I was the previous listing agent, right? I listed the property and somehow it didn't work out. And, you know, 2 months in, the seller decides to cancel. I provide the seller with the list of all these buyers, and we officially cancel. And then 3 months later, I find out that the seller put the property on the market with another brokerage. And then I see that it's pending, right? I'm going to do a little bit of research and find out, was any of the list of buyers that I submitted was the one that bought this property, right? Because what if you listed the property at this, but now another agent got the listing, right, and put the property for a lot less than what you had it listed. And now all those buyers that at one point saw the property realize, oh, now it's a good deal. Maybe I should buy now, right? That's the whole reason of protecting yourself and giving you that safety clause in there. But how does the seller protect themselves from paying a double commission? Well, when they go and sign the new listing agreement, they have to provide a list of anyone that's on this agreement, meaning that if I was the seller, right, and now I'm giving someone else the opportunity to sell, I'm going to tell the listing agent, hey, by the way, I just want some clarity because I had it listed with the previous agent that if any of these buyers come back and buy this, I am not entitled to pay a double commission. Mr. Simon, not a problem. I completely understand. Section 3F 1, or excuse me, 3F2, 3F1 explains that, you know, whoever submitted an offer, we're going to put their name on here. So if this buyer comes and buys this property, guess what? The seller is not obligated to pay the new listing agent a commission, because the commission, right? The commission was secured by the provision of the exclusion list that the previous agent, myself, provided to the seller. I hope that kind of makes sense. I hope it doesn't confuse you. But this is why, if any of these buyers buy, we're going to put that on the exclusion on the listing agreement, saying these are the people, if they are on this list, then I'm not obligated to pay you a commission, the new listing agent. And that protects the seller from paying a double commission. I hope that kind of makes sense. Now, the number of days of the safety clause must be filled in. Okay, just again, going back to this section here, you leave this blank, okay, then ultimately you even provide a list, right? And that list has 20 different buyers who have physically seen it or submitted an offer, right? Because you left it blank means that once it cancels, even if any of these 20 buyers come back and buy, you're not entitled to a commission. Okay, this is why it's crucial that you put something in there, because now it gives you what's called that safety clause, that after it expires, you're still entitled to a commission after the listing terminates. Okay. Now, part of the responsibility that you also have to understand is that if you are charging a commission of a total of 5%, there's also a section here, section D as in David, that you must include what's called a cooperating compensation. Okay. And if you read what it says under section D as in David, it says seller has been advised broker's policy regarding cooperations with and the amount of compensation offered to other brokers. One, broker is authorized to cooperate with the compensation brokers participating through the multiple listing service, MLS, by offering to the MLS broker out of broker's compensation as specified under paragraph 3A, either A, which is 3A, right? 3A, 5%. Now we're sharing, right? We're sharing part of that commission. Now, the standard, right? The standard has always been 50-50, right? Meaning that if you get a 5% commission, right, you typically want to give 2.5% to any cooperating brokerage. Here, that's where you're going to put 2.5%. That now splits the commission. So once you're in escrow is going to ask, well, what's the commission total and what's the commission split amongst the two offices, right? Well, the total is 5%, the total is 6%, and the commission split between the two offices, 2.5 to the listing side and 2.5 to the buy side, right? So again, and looking at the parameters in the position, remember, big picture is, what if you get a 6% commission, right? And you still want to pay a 2.5%, right? Well, that means that even if you do a 2.5% to the buy side, right? That means that you are actually getting 3.5%, right? Instead of 3%, because you're getting half a percentage from the buy side, right? As long as you put it in writing, right? Now the seller signs and initials here, then they acknowledge, agree to these terms. Okay. So when you're in escrow is going to be advised that the commission split is not equal, that the listing side is going to get more of a commission than the buy side. And that's perfectly fine. Maybe you're utilizing this leverage because you have out-of-pocket expenses, right? Getting a staging, right? Staging can be $2,000 to $3,000 to $5,000 or even more, right? To stage a home. Maybe you get a company out there to clean the property, right? Or declutter the home, or, do some repairs out of your marketing strategy, right? Then you can use that leverage on why you're entitled to a bigger commission. Okay, I hope that kind of makes sense. Now, just with anything, you can also do a flat rate, right? Instead of a percentage, you can do a flat rate, and that goes here as well. You can put a flat rate, but typically the norm has always been a percentage of the actual closing price, right? So if you list a property for $1 million, but after negotiations, you're down to 980, and it closes and records at 980, then your commission is based on the 980 price, not the listing price of $1 million. You can't go back to the seller and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we listed it for $1 million. Unfortunately, it was not me that, ultimately submitted an offer, and you agreed to a lower price. I'm still entitled to the full commission of that $1 million listing price. It doesn't work that way. How it works is based on the actual sale price, whatever the property sells. So if the property sells for $1 million less, then $100,000 less, then it's going to be based on that price of $900,000, not necessarily $1 million. I hope that kind of makes sense. Okay. The prospecting buyer must have either physically entered or had written an offer. The prospective buyer who purchased during the safety period must have physically seen the property and been shown the property during the listing period or submitted a signed offer during that time. So in order for us to fall under that safety clause, as I mentioned, you must make sure that you are providing the seller with that list of exclusions of buyers who physically or submitted an offer. Otherwise, you're not entitled to a commission. Now, if a buyer writes an offer which is accepted during the listing period, but the transaction does not close until after the expiration of the listing period, as to the buyer, the listing period is effectively extended until the closing. The safety clause does not apply in this instance. So let's just say you have a listing for 6 months, right? 6 months. 1 month is gone. 2 months is gone, 3 months is gone, 4 months is gone, 5 months is gone, right? And then for some odd reason, at the 6th month, you finally get a buyer that you hook, right? This buyer goes into contract, right? And now you know that it's a 30-day or a 35-day escrow, but you have to also remember, you got to be on top of your dates. If you had a 6-month listing, and now you only have 1 month left, and now you find a buyer that is going 30 days in, but you know that your listing is going to expire. What do you do in that instant, right? Well, based on what the agreement stipulates here is 2 things. One, the proactive approach is to extend the listing. There's a form called the ETA form, the extension of time addendum. What that form allows you to tell the seller is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I understand that, I had this listing for 6 months. We're at the home stretch and we're in escrow. This escrow is going to take longer than my expiration of my listing. So I'm asking for in hopes that you grant an extension of the listing agreement to maybe another 2 more months, right? And if the seller says, you know what, Simon, I don't have a problem. I'm grateful that we're in escrow. And I know that at the end of the month, this listing is going to expire, then I don't have a problem doing an extension of time. So what you're going to do is have the seller sign the extension of time addendum, right? The ETA form, sign it, execute it, bring it. Now you're going to extend it on the multiple listing service too, because remember, you don't want that to go as an expired listing, because once it expires by accident, then you're going to have all these agents, be like vultures trying to call the seller saying, hey, I know your property became an expired listing and wanted to see if you're hiring or you're looking to interview new agents, right? But wait a minute, we're still in escrow, right? So it's important that you keep tabs on your timeframes, right? The listing agreements, because that'll help you understand your role, your position, but more so gives you the upper advantage that now you can extend the MLS for an additional month or 2 months until the deal closes. Or based on, what the agreement says, that even if you're in escrow, right, and the deal ends up expiring, within the time period of your escrow, you're still under the rules and regulations entitled to a commission. So for example, let's just say that November 30th, right? November 30th is when the listing expires. But you know that the escrow is going to go till December 4th, as an example, right? Well, if you forget to extend the listing till, December 15, as an example, what the contract stipulates is the seller cannot come back and say, well, you know what, the listing expired, therefore I'm not entitled to give you a commission. Well, technically the seller is right, but also the seller is also technically wrong. And why is the seller wrong? Well, you ultimately got a buyer, they're in escrow, and to the unfortunate aspect of the position you're in, this buyer ended up submitting an offer at the very end of your listing agreement. And therefore that protection protects you and protects your commission. So even though you don't extend the escrow, as long as this buyer, remember the key here is as long as this buyer goes through the motions, closes the deal, then you're still entitled to a commission. You're in a position to get an earned commission. So I just want to keep that in the making, because again, it wouldn't be fair, right? Because then the seller can say, well, you know what, the listing expires, I don't have to pay you a commission, and I don't have to pay the buyer's agent who brought a ready, willing, and able buyer a commission. Well, that would not be fair. That would not be cool, right? So that's why you got to be on top and make sure that you are looking at your timelines of events, right? If you know that this listing is about to expire, check with your transaction coordinator or someone that's holding you accountable to all these timelines. If it's an administrator or if it's your transaction coordinator, it has to be someone that's allowing you the opportunity for you to press forward, right? Because again, I don't want it to be where you're now in a position where you're losing the opportunity because you were not proactive in your approach. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So section F2, seller warns that the seller has no obligation to pay a compensation to any broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to the following individual or entities. If the property is sold to anyone listed above during the time, seller is obligated to compensate the other broker. Broker is not entitled to compensation under this agreement, and the broker is not obligated to represent the seller in any such transaction. Okay. So basically what it stipulates here is that you want to make sure, again, and the reason I just wanted to touch on this earning of a commission on the listing agreement is really this format of this one pager here, right? Even though the listing agreement commences of multiple forms, right? The one that I want you to really focus on is the first page, that it is thoroughly completed, right? Thoroughly completed. And that you are putting all the language that is necessary to protect you and protect your commission. Okay, because again, if the deal ends up canceling or ends up expiring, you don't provide that list of buyers, then the seller is not entitled to pay you a commission. And it's going to be far and few and hard to collect a commission. And, there's a lot of listings that end up expiring. There's a lot of listings that end up expiring. Okay. And for some odd reason, most put time, effort, and energy and don't get a commission. This is just to have that level of protection that allows you the opportunity, right? The opportunity to get paid for services rendered, right? And more so if the seller decides to go in a different direction, wants to list with another brokerage. And that happens quite often. How many times have you been on the multiple listing service, right? And you see that this particular property has been listed with one company, another company, and another company, right? That's why I want to make sure that you're protected under these elements, because without the right information on here, then it's going to be hard for even myself to go after your earned commission. Okay, that's why the date preparation is important. That's why the seller's information is important. That's why, you know, the brokerage information is important, the address, the APN number, right? And then obviously the big one is the price, right? And the listing terms and the commission splits and the exclusion list, right? Who is obligated to be excluded, right? If these individuals end up buying the property, because the seller will be obligated to pay 2 commissions, right? And then obviously, you know, if the seller is making it very, very difficult for you to show the property, you know, you're submitting offers. Now, in my opinion, it's a catch-22, meaning that there's going to be times, there's going to be days that it's going to be very frustrating that ultimately you may not collect a commission. You know, the deal cancels and, you know, seller goes in a different direction. And because you didn't put the proper information, now, you know, you're coming to your broker and saying, well, Simon, I need some assistance, and or whoever your broker is, right? We need to resolve this. Well, I'm going to be asking you very difficult, you know, commanded questions. You know, where's the listing agreement? Did you get the seller to sign? You know, what was the game? What transpired? What ultimately made the seller decide to cancel with you, right? Well, X, Y, and Z. Well, tell me a little bit more. So again, I don't want you to be in a position. This is why it's very, very important that you create these forms and understand every element of what these paragraph stipulate and what these paragraph state. So that way you can navigate these forms in a way to get paid a commission. Okay. So with that being said, any questions from the RLA that you have? Anything that you want to know? Anything that I missed that you'd like me to touch on? Okay. Well, it looks like there's no questions, so I'm going to go ahead and come off. And again, earning a commission during the listing agreement, right? It's awesome to get a listing agreement in place, right? It's so cool to get the listing. I got the listing. You have 6 months to list the property and sell the property. You know, marketing is very, very important, right? And attracting buyers, right? And negotiating the offers as well. At the end, it's the seller's discretion, right? Because even if you list the property for $1 million, and a buyer comes in and offers you $1.5 million, and you present, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I got you $1.5 million offer. Okay. Which for a lot of us, it may be very enticing. Wow, Simon, you got me $1.5 million offer. Fantastic. Let's open escrow. There may be a seller that may disagree and say, look, Simon, I don't want $1.5 million. I want $2 million, right? Now with that, unfortunately, you cannot be paid a commission. Did you do your comparable market analysis, right? Did you evaluate and do your homework on this property? Because if the seller feels that it's not a price, one, you didn't sell them on your value proposition, or two, you didn't do your homework, right? This is why we talk about comparing apples to apples, right? You know, properties that have sold in the last 90 days, and now more so because the market has definitely tightened up, interest rates have climbed up. You know, you really want to do your homework and do as many scenarios to really get a concise opinion, right? An opinion of value before you even list the property. Because if you don't do your homework and you list the property way below and you get traction, right? But it's not the attraction you want, or you overprice the property way above the area and you don't get traction either, then, you know, you're kind of in a bind there, right? Now, this is my suggestion, and I'll close with this. You know, when doing a listing presentation, you know, sometimes, and I hear this quite often from listing agents, well, how do I evaluate a home? How do I know if this is the price, right, of the home? Well, study the market, do a comparable analysis, right? Check comps, right? Check what's available, check what's under contract, check what's pending, check what's sold, and more so what has sold in the 90 days. In the past, we would say go back 6 months. But 6 months, the rates were a lot less than what the rates are now. So you can't really go 6 months. You got to be tight on that and now do 90 days, at least 3 months, because 3 months gives you a good gauge. It gives you a good parameter, and it gives you a good perspective of what the market is really telling you, right? And now you can be very aggressive in your approach, because now you are, within, the comps in the neighborhood, right? You don't want to go outside too far, right? Within half a mile to a mile radius maximum from the subject property, right? Meaning that if the property is, here in the city of Torrance, you want to go as far as 1 mile from the subject property. Anything outside of that may push you in a different geographical area, right? That may push you into Redondo Beach. That may push you into Lomita. That may push you into Carson, right? So those are not comparable properties. It has to be within the specific of the city, the area, and then the square footage, year built, and all that, because you cannot compare a property, right, from a 1950 build to a 2023 or 2022 build, right? It's not a comparison. So you got to make sure that you're analyzing this property so you're not frustrated, and ultimately you sell the property so that way you earn a commission. So with that being said, any final questions before we close it? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Teresa. And
Thank you, Simon.
hope for being on this call. Have a phenomenal afternoon. Be safe, and I'll see you on the next class.
Thanks. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.